Hello, hello. We are live. How are you? How are you today, Sean? Thank you for joining us today.
I'm great, Dr. Bryant. Great to see you again.
All right, great. Hi there, everyone. I'm Dr. Nelva Bryant from When Pets Fly. I am, let's see, I'm sorry, we're a little bit thrown off a little bit today. I apologize for being a little bit late today. And Greta should be joining us. She's having technical difficulties. That's the story of everything with us, Sean, right? I am so happy that you're back with us. But again, let me pause for a second. I'm Dr. Nelva Bryant. I am a veterinarian, and I work in the airline industry for Delta Airlines. I've been on staff with them since 2018 to, in a sense, help with the transportation policies and procedures for transporting live animals by cargo. And I enjoy that role in that position. Within that role, I've had the pleasure of meeting so many different people in the animal transportation industry that really are strong stakeholders of transporting animals. And it could be your personal pet. It could be a zoo animal. It could be day-old chicks or poultry. It could be research animals. So I've met quite unique people during my tenure and everything, and I love that opportunity. So I'm sharing with you guys just folks that I've met over the years that are have a great influence on animal transportation. I brought back Sean Harding because I don't know if you guys are. He's been with us a couple times, and we had some technical difficulties the last time. It was like, Sean, it was like being in the middle of a great conversation, and then it dropped. And I'm like, dang it. It was my fault. I lost internet, and that's what happens. What can we do? But I felt bad about it, but definitely want you to share everything fully as far as our interview and just keep us abreast of what you're doing, Sean. So that's who I am, Dr. Nelva Bryant. Sean, please introduce yourself and we'll keep moving forward.
Thank you, Dr. Bryant. My name is, again, Sean Harding, President of Business Development at BioTrans Logistics. In my role, I help navigate the team when it comes to developing new lanes, new products, working with regulatory agencies, and then being heavily active with advocacy groups, associations, to push both the quality of our service and the industry along. So I've had the pleasure of meeting Dr. Bryant a few times at the association events and also working directly when we have shipments with Delta, and we're able to help navigate some challenging regulatory issues or IATA issues, LAR issues, those type of things that inevitably come up, and she's been a great partner. So happy to be here and share some of my knowledge and experience over the last 10 years in this industry.
That's great. Well, again, thanks again for joining us so that we can further dive into what you do. And also just, again, for us to just stress as far as animal transportation, the regulations behind it. You mentioned briefly IATA, that's the International Air Transport Association. They have the guidelines, the Live Animal Regulations Manual. That's the in a sense, the Bible of transporting that you should refer to when transporting animals by cargo. And also, I think also some aspect of being transporting by ground transportation to a certain extent as well, right?
There is some aspects of trying to maintain the environmental conditions and sort of the quality and safety through the entire journey. And there's multiple regulatory bodies, whether it's EU or United States, USDA and the CDC, DOT is a number of regulatory bodies that are constantly sort of regulating the full journey of any animal shipment. So that regulatory regime is quite interesting. It can be a bit complex to navigate. Thankfully, our team can do a pretty good job at that. And so if it's import regulation into China or some other VAT challenge we may have in Europe or an import tariff issue going on into the United States, all these regimes sort of really overlay even the live animal transport. So they'll have to be taken into consideration so you can make sure the journey is as succinct and without delay as much as possible. Most of the animals that we're transporting, we're trying to get, between 48 hours and 72 hours transported anywhere in the world. So a lot of nuances that can come up that could potentially interrupt those sort of journey times. So it's you need to be on the ball with those.
Definite. Well, it looks like Greta has joined us. Greta, thank you for joining. I know you have technical difficulties, but I'm glad you joined us. Please introduce yourself and we'll pop up moving forward.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Sorry I'm late. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry I'm late. My name is Greta Russo, and I also help Dr. Bryant in her journey with When Pets Fly, and sharing the information that we get, and also all of the different stakeholders in this animal transportation space with all of you.
Yeah, and you have not had the pleasure of meeting Sean, because I think you were doing your duties at the time, so you missed meeting Sean and everything. But yeah, Sean's a great guy. I love it.
Pleasure to meet you, Greta.
Yeah.
Pleasure to meet you too, Sean.
Yeah. Let me give another question here on the banner. Yeah, keep talking, Sean. Tell us more about what you do and everything with your background. Because again, it's interesting. Your background is not. I always say it's interesting to me how there's people that have different backgrounds, but they also somehow go into the animal transportation industry, and they bring all their different aspects, their different backgrounds to it, but it's still focusing on animal transportation and welfare. And please share that about your background and what you do with BioTrans.
Obviously, this is a super niche industry, so I often notice the same sort of interesting factors of how various professionals end up in this sort of industry. And from my perspective, when we're dealing with temperature controlled, time sensitive, highly regulated shipments, you need a certain type of personality that's a really attention to detail, likes puzzles, can handle some pressure, understands the rigorous expectations of shippers and receivers. And so you have to have a certain personality type, I would say, that's really driven on finding successful outcomes to challenging situations. I think at the core, everyone in this industry is built like that. And so my personal background, I was in the military for many years, and then background in finance and business administration, and eventually law school, and a few other degrees along the way. So I was a professional student for quite a bit. I had some connections into sales and logistics, and I did a little bit of that in the military as well. So it was a bit of a natural fit to sort of help out some colleagues in a pinch, and that morphed into business opportunity that I was not expecting. And I couldn't have told you how animals move from one place to another 10 years ago to save my life. So naturally, I think my skill set and my personality type fit into the needs of the business opportunity, and I was able to become one of the owners of the company, and then help develop the business dramatically over the last 10 years. So a very small couple of vehicles, couple of offices in the U.S., and now we're in multiple different countries, 26 offices, hundreds of employees, hundreds of assets, moving millions of animals. So we've been very successful in that aspect. And if I look back on company success and what has helped us scale and really grow to that level is being very quality based, really understanding regulations, focusing on maintaining the highest service levels as possible. Because any animal shipper will tell you each shipment is the most important shipment to the shipper and the receiver. Especially on the life science side, you can see some really high value, important shipments for really valuable research, cancer, diabetes, you name it. So the impact of not having a successful outcome can be rather detrimental. So, we've been very successful to be able to scale up and handle millions of animals in the course of a year, and thousands of shipments a week. So those sort of characteristics and traits are really suited me well, and I think suit everybody well in this industry.
Yeah.
I have a question. Is there a huge difference or a slight difference between regulations and I guess maybe standard operating procedures in what you do with shipping animals that may be with life sciences versus helping pet parents get their dogs with them on vacation? Is there a difference in that type of travel?
There is. Generally, you're not going to see a big variation on the airline side, because basically an animal's an animal for airline purposes. Some of the animals we ship are specific pathogen free, so they're SPF, so they're bred in a germ free environment, so their containers will be a bit different. So when we look at screening and we look at handling and we look at feed and water, some things you may see on the companion side, you're not going to necessarily see that on shipments that are self-contained with their own nutrition for multiple day journeys. So that is a bit of a different aspect. But as far as temperature requirements, as far as meeting the LAR container requirements, as far as labeling and marking, they're different in some aspects, but generally the same. So we just got to keep really track of some of those nuances, whether it's the color of a label, if it's an SPF or a laboratory animal, and just some of the journey times. So, but we move companion animals, we move zoologics, we move aquatics, we move embryos, we move everything in the temperature sensitive category. We'll even do human remains and pharma. So anything specialty cargo is sort of a space we like to live in. And every one of those shipments can have variations, which is why you really need to be in the regulations and understanding the nuances to make sure you have successful outcomes.
Yeah, that's great. So I guess do you guys do on-site training, or are you looking for people that are coming with a certain skill set to work in your cargo shipping?
So that's a great question. We find it challenging to find staff off the street necessarily who have the experience that you would hope to have someone just as a plug and play team member. So generally, it's a lot of training, 6 to 12 months on the air side for sure before some of our team members are really proficient. We're shipping to every country in the world that's not on the OFAC sanctions list. So that can be challenging to make sure you're understanding the different routing combinations, plane types, arrival times, weather patterns, embargo schedules. Yeah. Obviously still need to manage rates and manage ports of departure. So a lot of pieces that go into the puzzle. And because we handle end-to-end shipping, that also makes it a little bit more complicated because we can be picking up from a location in Seattle and we need to get to Cambodia. And so the combinations of ports of origin and destination can be a bit complex and not necessarily a lot of flight routing options. So you have to get creative at times. So generally it takes a person with the right multitasking skill set, attention to detail that likes puzzles, and then we can hire for attitude, train for skill, as I like to say.
Yeah, because again, what folks don't realize, it's really complicated depending on your destination. If you're traveling internationally, you also with yours, you've got to make sure the animals meet the requirements of that destination country as well. You can't just ship it, and if they don't meet requirements, you've got to deal with them being denied entry and then somehow getting back. And with, say, specialty shipments, for research or for situations like that, I mean, time is of essence. You need to get them there quickly and all that. So there's a lot that folks don't realize. The background as far as getting prepared, making sure that the appropriate aircraft, routing, as you said, and with the aircraft, does the aircraft have temperature controls and ventilations? All these things comes into play, and it's not simple. So plug and play. It would be great if you could say grab anybody to do it, but it's so much detail behind it. You've got to get the right people. You got
to really be on it. And obviously, when you're shipping into different countries, their import requirements are going to be different. And while exporting, documentation with the USDA may be relatively straightforward, many countries have different time restrictions on the time of inspection versus the time of actual export. So when you're dealing with getting shipments all over North America to everywhere else in the world and the limitations on airline options, that can really create a tap dance of timing, and you have to come up with some creative solutions to manage all the parties.
Right.
This is a question that.
No, go ahead.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Dr. Bryant. I was saying this is a question you popped up, and I wasn't sure if you hit the answer to this or if you were getting ready to.
I'll segue into it. I was just saying, gosh, it all depends on the type of animals that you're shipping too, as far as the regulations. So typically, what regulations that you have to apply for? I mean, what regulatory authorities do you have to consider with the majority of your shipments?
So for the life cycle of a shipment, we are working with the shipper to make sure we understand what we're shipping, the quantity that we're shipping, to make sure we get the right size vehicle, because if you get over 10,000 pounds in the US, you're under DOT regulations. It's a whole different regime. You have hours of service limitations for larger vehicles, how far you can drive. So if I need to pick a shipment up in Kansas City, but I don't have any available flight routing to get to my destination unless I go to Chicago, there is instances where I'll have to pick up a shipment in Kansas City, drive to Chicago to get an export flight that's going to connect in Europe, and then maybe move on to Malaysia. And that may be literally one of two flight options that I have to make sure that that combination is successful. So understanding that in the beginning, and then double checking the shipper's paperwork to make sure that it's in order for the export requirements. Again, working with the consignees or our colleagues on the destination to make sure their import documents are ready and that they can actually receive it, import permits and certificates and licenses, authorities that may be required to get to the final destination. And then again, documents changing, updates are happening to the shipment, all from basically a preliminary phase to the final phase, and to make sure everything in the middle between the booking with the airline is correct, the rate we're getting charged is correct, the weather is going to be within range, the packaging, the labeling, and then obviously monitoring the flight to destination and make sure everything clears customs and gets delivered within a tight time window. All of those things happen. So it's DOT, it's USDA, it's airlines. So the LAR is a big one. It's also individual airlines will have some different requirements that you always have to take into consideration that may not be LAR specific. And it could be a total time in transit on a flight. It can only be a direct flight. So you really have to use the combinations and understand what any of those challenges could mean for the journey or your cost profile or the safety of the animal.
Right. And you know what? There's also limitations on certain airlines. Certain airlines don't transport research animals too. So
we only have about 10 airlines that will regularly ship on the life science side. So more when it comes to obviously companion or aquatics or zoologics. So that's another regime that you have to, constantly monitor and see out of my potential solutions, how do I get to various port in the Middle East? You may have one or two options, and those options may only be seasonal when the temperatures are favorable, and the plane types get rotated oftentimes on legs. So you could be looking to really time a shipment to a certain region in a specific month of the season and hope that the airline has the proper flight rotation for the plane type to make sure you can execute from start to finish. So yeah, nice big puzzle.
Yeah.
Do the airlines, you said there's only 10 airlines that work with you in life sciences. Do they have to have a special type of outfitting within their cargo for life science type of stuff, shipping, or?
No, they're just general cargo hold that has temperature controlled settings. Generally, most of the animals we're moving, anywhere from 55 to 75 Fahrenheit is an acceptable temperature range. So there's not going to be mortality issues or any health status issues when it comes to that. So, that's the challenging part, is only having a limited subset of partners that you can rely on. And even out of those 10, they may not go to the port, or they may not have a flight from the closest origin point that you're trying to take off from. So there's many times that we'll have to have a long drive from pickup point to departure airport to make sure we can get the right airline that we want and get to the right destination we want. Even importing into the U.S. is oftentimes we'll have to take a flight from Australia into Los Angeles and then put it on a domestic flight to the East Coast to make sure it can get from, Melbourne, Australia to, northern Maine in 3 days. And so that's, it can get a little challenging. There's a lot of ground components and transit clearances and little nuances that you become familiar with having to face these challenges over time.
That's a lot of movement. That's a lot of coordination and timing and just details.
And if it's,
nice.
one or two shipments, that most, people who are shipping pet shipments might do in a day, or, 10 in a week, 20 in a week even, that's, the level of complexity becomes much more challenging when you start doing hundreds of shipments a week. So you got to really be falling back on your training, your processes, your checks, and your systems to make sure that all those things can be accounted for.
amazing.
It seems like we touched on this question as well.
Okay, we touched
What
on,
modes of
yeah, because it's almost like planes, trains, and automobiles. I mean, there's so many methods to transport. My goodness.
Yeah, animals in general can travel by all the above, obviously maritime as well.
Right.
Because of the nature of the species that we ship, everything's very time sensitive. So it's ground and air. Ground is preferable to maintain the environment from collection all the way to the destination, because you have only one environment that doesn't necessarily change that much temperature wise, and you can control lighting, you can control the variables pretty succinctly. But obviously over long distances, it is more advantageous to fly by air, and then intercontinent. That's obviously your only option. So we do a combination of both, depending on where the shipment is and where it's going and the species, and have to try to manage that. We deliver by ground in all the lower 48 states by ground each week. So we have a vehicle in every state in the contiguous U.S. Doing deliveries, and then 5 out of the 7 provinces in Canada every week, and that will be from potentially 120 degrees out to minus 50. We've been doing transports, and obviously airlines wouldn't be an option in those environmental conditions. So that's where ground. We may need to ground something from Canada to almost the Mexican border, or Brownsville, Texas, all the way up to Winnipeg. So having all of those options allows us to keep the ball moving, so to speak, and to handle so many shipments over the course of the year. But when the environmental conditions get that extreme, you have to have contingencies in place, a lot of monitoring systems to make sure the environment in the cargo area where the animals would be stays as temperate as possible.
Right. That's perfect.
How should the animals be packed and transported?
So obviously the animals need to have the right packing density, so they have enough room to move. So depending on the quantity and the container that the shipper may want to transport in, we always got to make sure, if it's a companion animal, the dogs or cats can move around and stretch their legs and meet all the requirements in that aspect. Or even smaller packages of rodents, definitely you got to watch the grams and make sure that there's enough metric space of volume in the container so that the density requirements are met. You got to make sure there's the right nutrition for the journey, and depend again on the species. Even in the last week, we had swine, sheep, mice, cats, dogs, aquatics, everything in between. And so you need to understand, if it's an aquatic, what's my oxygenation situation in case something gets delayed in journey. So how is the packing? We do samples and specimens with animal byproducts too. So we're also dealing with other cold chain mediums of liquid nitrogen and dry ice and cold packs. So all of these things need to be taken into consideration depending on the product you move in, the time in transit, feed, rest points. But packaging, air-wise, obviously we got to really focus on the LAR to make sure the right containers being used with the right construction materials, with the right dimensions, and then labeling and the journey contingencies are all in place.
Yeah. One thing I've noticed is that a lot of shipments that we've denied, there's individuals, well, number one, they don't follow the IATA LAR. They don't follow that at all. And then some things they do are, to me, are just straight common sense to think about. You'll have, say, it could be a reptile shipment, snake shipment, and they'll put them in a container and it's not ventilated. Ventilation, they do breathe, certain, they breathe oxygen, of course. I mean, there could be some that's amphibian and maybe they need to be in oxygenated water, but your routine snake, turtle, that's, on land, they require oxygen. And to me, it's just mind blowing to me that they don't even consider that. It's like, wow, they breathe air, right? So they require ventilation. So put them in something that's ventilated properly.
And that's where the professionalism and the experience of trying to find partners that do this for, a living, so to speak, and do it every day, all day in large quantities, you're going to get that experience, and you're not going to have those sort of deviations. But it's a good point. And they also, the construction material of containers can sometimes be taken for granted. And when you're on a plane, last thing you want is an animal escaping in a plane, chewing its way through a container, and then potentially causing some damage. So those things really need to be taken into consideration. And as a freight forwarder and as an intermediary that's managing between the shipper and the consignee, you have to be able to gauge the level of understanding that your shippers have, because from day to day, you may be dealing with a very experienced, seasoned shipper who has their shipping requirements down to a T. You never have to worry about it. They're on the ball. But the very next day or the very next shipment that you pivot to could be someone who's doing it for the first time. So you really need to ask the right questions and have the right upfront documentation and collaboration to really gauge, has this person done it before? Do I really need to get into the nitty gritty of the construction material, or is this a more seasoned person that you have built a relationship with to know that they have a good understanding of what's going on? So that's always got to be in the back of my mind. If I'm managing a shipment, that's always one thing that I will never take for granted, because as soon as you assume that a shipper is going to have the product you need ready in the right format at pickup, you're going to catch yourself in challenge. And then once you have a non-compliant shipment at pickup, it can be very difficult to either have the shipper take the shipment back or make modifications on site because they probably didn't have the right materials or labels or securing devices at first. So then I'll have to get involved and somehow in the middle of the journey before we get to an airline or between destinations, help modify the packaging and the transport conditions to make it compliant so that we can continue on with the journey. So not a lot of companies are probably doing that for their customers, but you have to be able to think quick on your feet and adjust if you see a compliance. Some of them are minor. Some might be missing one label, or maybe a zip tie is missing, or something minor. Maybe a journey sheet isn't filled out quite appropriately.
Those
more non-compliant issues too, where you have to maybe change a crate quickly because the airline has made a judgment that there's just not enough room, and you can get the tape measures out and try to maybe find some common ground on those things. But ultimately, if the airline doesn't feel like the crate's compliant, then the only way to move forward is get a compliant crate. So you need to be able to access those things quickly, and the right water bowls, the right feed bowls, a lot of things that need to be compliant.
Yeah. No, there's working with someone who's well known and well versed with it is a definitely key. One thing, like I said, through When Pets Fly, as far as pet owners, I try to share as much as possible for them to prepare their pets for air travel, and those little details are really important. They don't realize sometimes just even the sizing of a container and the construction of a container does matter during transport, because if it impacts their safety and welfare. I mean, as you mentioned earlier, being able to stretch their legs and move around and everything, that's actually a regulatory requirement. That's not a policy. That's a regulatory requirement for their transport. And folks need to understand that. Don't pull out the crate that you for your pet, your dog, that you potty trained it in when it was, up to say 6 to 8 months of age, and then try to shove it in there when he's 4 or 5 years old, because he's probably way too big. So things to consider. So,
Sean, do you have veterinarians that are on staff, or do they travel with the animals just to help in the care during travel?
So we do have veterinarian staff that we can leverage as part of our global team. The veterinarians generally do not travel with smaller shipments, but we do at times move larger shipments, and it will not be necessarily our veterinarian or veterinarian team that we could try to bring in. It'd be mostly the shippers or the consignees that would want to have their own vet team travel with the shipment, just based on the sensitivity of the journey or the value of the animals, or just how important it is to a particular project that's going on. So we do see that they may want to follow the truck, they may want to ride with the truck, they may want to help be part of the transit journey. It's not too frequent, but as you get into bigger species that require more hands-on management, that's when you see those sort of activities.
Have you ever assisted with the transport of some larger animals, horses, or anything like that?
Our company does. I haven't personally done a horse transport, but I was just at the Animal Lounge in Qatar. See Qatar Airways new Animal Lounge, and they had plenty of horses coming in, so it was good to see how those horses are managed in transit between journeys. But we do zoological, so you can, anything from bears and lions and jaguars, everything in between. We will get requests for some exotics around those, and snakes, so stuff like that. I will do shipments myself, oftentimes, to either help out the team or a particularly high profile shipment. I'll offer my assistance directly, so I'm not opposed to jumping in a truck and helping manage a delivery or a tender or a collection, or working with customs if there's perhaps maybe a customs delay or a technical issue that does happen. We deal with so many commercial customers who have their own customs brokers that we will handle customs brokerage on our own, but we also need to navigate other vendors and parties that we don't have direct control over. And oftentimes I'll have to get involved to help expedite challenging customs issues, because again, we have a very limited time window from origin to destination to get the containers delivered. So yeah, interesting day to day, that's for sure.
I can imagine. As you were saying all of that, I was just remembering, I think it was not too long ago, they talked about pandas being transferred to different zoos in the United States. And I figured you must have been a part of that, or something like that.
So generally, it's either my company could be a part of it, or I know who's managing it. That's for sure. Because I didn't handle that panda one specifically, but it's a small group of people that have the experience, especially with the larger species that need custom cages, need extra care, need the right sort of contingencies in place. So it's interesting being a part of the larger community and involved in the associations. We definitely hear that pretty much all of the members of the Animal Transportation Association are involved in any sort of high profile shipment that may be going on anywhere. And that could be hippos in Colombia that need to be repurposed from the Pablo Escobar days, or pandas that need to go from zoos because it's so protected, to giraffes and everything in between. So it's a very, very interesting line of work.
Yeah, and share, while you're talking about the different as far as associations, share as far as you being the president of the Animal Transportation Association, some of the initiatives.
I joined the Animal Transportation Association, I believe, 5 years ago, on the board, and so it's been a couple of years on the board, and then the last 2 years I've been the ATA president. My term just expired in February this year when we had our last annual conference. So now I'll be past president for the allotted period of time. So the new president is now Lodi Burke from Qatar Airways, and he's going to do a great job. So worked with Lodi quite a bit and try to continue the mission of the ATA. We're growing our membership exponentially year over year. We see a lot of growth in the companion animal side. But I would say from other associations that I'm involved in, ATA really brings a diverse group of technical experts together. And so you're going to have the best airline representatives you can help manage your networking and your relationships with. You're going to have USDA, CDC, or foreign country regulators that you can really learn from. You're going to have national regulators that you can work with. New EU regulations have been a big topic of discussion. EU Commission has offered some of their team members to present and attend the last few ATA conferences. So it's really good to help build relationships there and offer our experience and help mold legislation, because it can be very challenging when legislation can get put down on the industry without a lot of feedback and participation of what the downstream impacts will be. So you don't get that at other associations and other groups. So it's a wide variety, and we serve all animal species and all uses of animals. So you really see the best of the best, as opposed to some that are really only for aquatics or only for companion animals or reptiles.
Very cool.
I definitely agree. I think ATA is more scientific based behind it, and I really appreciate that. I definitely see that. I see a difference with it, honestly.
For sure.
Man.
You have the question up. What are the specific? Oh, okay, you changed it.
Sorry. Hold on. There we go.
That's okay.
So the specific care requirements obviously depend on the species. A lot of especially in the preclinical side, that we move everything mostly self-contained. But as you get to larger species, cats and dogs and swine, and all the way up into really large species, you definitely the feeding and the watering and the rest breaks and the visual inspections all come into that regime quite a bit. On the ground portion of the journey up into the air transit, and then obviously managing, making sure the air transit goes as smooth as possible, and then on to arrival at the destination, and then maintaining those conditions all the way through. So you need to understand your journey plan. You need to understand where your rest breaks need to be, and then have contingencies, because trucks break down, airlines cancel flights, adverse weather events happen with little notice, and those can all impact any transit. And once you've sort of started that transit, oftentimes there's no turning back and say, oh, okay, we're going to try this another day. It's you need to manage through it and have contingencies. The good part of my company specifically is we have so many offices dispersed around the United States and the world. So if there is an adverse event, we can generally marshal a response or a contingency plan relatively quickly and really reduce the impact of any adverse event and still have a successful shipment.
That's awesome. Awesome.
That's great.
How's that one there?
Insurance options. I get this question quite a bit, and insurance is somewhat of a near and dear topic to me, only because I think our insurance just went up about $500,000 this year in general as a company. Obviously, conditions around the world have been challenging with major weather events and wildfires, and those major events obviously hit insurance companies hard. So a lot of us in any sort of business aspect are definitely feeling insurance challenges beyond just general business insurance going up. There is ways to specifically have shipment level insurance for live animals, but it can be a little bit nuanced. So you can have your general cargo insurance, you can have your general liability insurance, you can have umbrella insurance, and we have to have all of those per our customer contracts that really help capture the value of any shipment and having an adverse outcome. So we need to keep $5 million, limits on umbrellas and millions of dollars on our cargo policy in case anything were to happen. Oftentimes the question around insurance for shipping animals is more on a per shipment basis, where a shipper will say, can I get insurance? Oftentimes airlines will offer insurance, or you can get extra protection with declared values on your railway bill, but those same airlines will then exclude that regime for live animal shipments. So you first is check with the airline and see, do they offer insurance? Do they offer declaring a higher value of the shipment, so you get out of the sort of the standard Montreal Convention regime that is the underlying basis for liability policies at the airlines. Secondarily, you can go to the outside market, and there are some insurers that will insure anything. They can insure baseball cards and gold. They can insure shipments. They're assessing the risk and amortizing that risk into a policy, either per shipment or over a period of time. So we have some vendors that we can work with on that if a shipper felt like they needed specific per shipment insurance that they wanted to pay a little extra for peace of mind.
Yeah, I'm not actually. That's one area I'm not familiar with, to be honest with you. If Delta does offer or not, I'm not even familiar with that, to be honest with you. But I think it's an interesting topic related to live animal shipments. I would imagine, high value zoo animal shipments, I'm sure they're definitely insured. So I can imagine there's a.
Yep. It's an interesting cargo regime of how it was all developed, in the 30s and 40s and 50s, and then developed on. So if it's not necessarily the most exciting read to go through airline liability and cargo insurance, sort of statistics and policies and financial calculations on how they would come to potentially a liability claim. But if you do get a chance, you'll see it's a bit convoluted. So it's a question that oftentimes does come up.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's change a little gears here. Let's talk about some interesting things you've done as far as transports and everything. Tell us about some interesting.
So the interesting thing about our team is because we ship for all range of uses or species, we run into a wide variety of interesting shipments. We had so for instance, last year we had a charter shipments of bees to Canada because there were, I believe, because of the wildfires and some other challenging environmental conditions, the bee population had been quite decimated in Canada, and they needed to import some bees to help repopulate the Canadian population. So that was an interesting one that I wouldn't have realized. The Canadian Forestry Service is looking for, sort of help with that sort of activity. We moved everything from mosquitoes to snakes to reptile feed. So Dubai roaches that are, the big roaches that have to get moved in large containers of soil. And we used Delta's team a few times, but we have to manage at that point is an interesting one because they have to be kept in very specific temperatures when they land. Otherwise they overheat and can have a lot of mortality issues. So we got to have coolers potentially available, and that's under a USDA regime for pet and plant inspection. So there's another extra level of inspection that needs to happen.
PPQ.
PPQ, and there's not PPQ stations everywhere. So you have to really work with your shippers and your importers to make sure that they have import coverage for particular ports. You got to make sure that particular port has a PPQ station, or if they don't, you need to work with CBP Agriculture on behalf of USDA and work with how they handle their inspections and their rotations and their overtime schedules and their, plus. And so those become, again, if you like a puzzle, that's another good one. But the zoologics, we've moved CITES, vultures to South Africa, and jaguars from London to Copenhagen. We've moved, the teammates have moved at some points of our careers, lions and tigers and bears, and everything in between. There's some animals that I wouldn't even have known existed in the rodent family that are super unique. Day goose we moved a couple days ago. We'll move possums. Again, you wouldn't really think a possum would be getting transported too many places. And then we move avian products. So they held chicks.
I'm telling you my possum story. We moved a possum, and it made it to its destination. And upon arrival, they says, "Oh, the possum was dead." And I was like, "Wait a minute, no way." So I'm researching what happened with the ship and everything was fine. Everything made to the destination late, made to there safely. No obvious signs of any external damage to the container, all that, and everything was fine. So I followed up like a few days later saying, we didn't find anything in reference to the shipment, no damage, nothing, except, with a delivery, no problems. And they says, "Oh, the possum was playing possum."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it was fine. It was perfectly fine. It was playing possum.
Yep. So it's super interesting. Obviously, those types of things you have to keep in consideration. We've moved bighorn sheep for a royal family in Abu Dhabi. We get requests for dolphins and whales and everything in between. So these animals do ship for various reasons, and they need professionals to manage them. So there's really no reason why companies can't do it, but it's complex. And it takes experience, and it takes a lot of effort and time to be really meticulous, especially for the bigger species. So you're generally left with a very small percentage of people that have the experience or willing to take on the challenge.
Yeah. I'm glad that you've got some interesting experiences, which is great.
Puzzles is probably
you like puzzles? Yeah. They're really cool. All right, so tell me some of the challenges, though, as far as
on that.
You go ahead.
I apologize. I was just wondering, when natural disasters happen, do you get called in to help save the animals?
We do have some agreements with universities in the U.S. East Coast, especially in the hurricane zones, that if there was going to be a natural disaster or a potential for one, that we could be called in short notice to come collect animals at a zoo or a specific university and move them to a safer area, either in collaboration with another third-party facility or our own facility until the exigent circumstances have passed, and then potentially bring back. So we're capable of that. Again, our large network is advantageous, so we offer that up to the entire animal shipping industry. We have competitors that will call us on a pinch because a truck broke down, or other parties that were not necessarily involved in the shipment, but because we want to be good stewards of the industry and realize that it's the difficult task that we're doing day in and day out, to be available for anybody that's in need if our assets can be of use.
That's great.
But as far as the general,
you started to ask what are the biggest.
Yeah, as far as the biggest challenges, it's tough to say one is bigger than the other, because any of the 50 challenges that you might face in a shipment can ultimately make it unsuccessful. So it's not, the order of priority would probably change depending on the shipper and the destination and the location. So first of all is to make sure that your shipper is following guidelines, following your instructions, understands the regulations themselves, or you can help shepherd them through the process. Now, there is a challenge in that, and I've seen that personally, where I've given very explicit explanations and very detailed instructions, and the party that's shipping, oh, yep, got it, yep, all good. And then you go to check the documents and they're still wrong. Okay, actually, I need you to change X, Y, and Z, come back still wrong. So you really need to be patient and understand that shippers really may not be familiar with what it takes to get a cargo from A to B. And so that for me is always the first one to gauge. Secondly is understanding the complexity of the transport. What are my flight options? What are my arrival options? If I need to ship into Saudi Arabia, I can't arrive at 3 p.m. I need to get there at 11 p.m. or 1 a.m. and manage the customs and nobody wants anything arriving on the weekend. So oftentimes no one wants anything arriving on a Friday, just in case that there's a delay or a customs issue. So you got Monday to Thursday to make things happen, and you don't always have flights on every day. So you really need to manage reducing the risk as much as possible. I guess that would probably be the biggest challenge. How can I have good processes, procedures, and strategies in place to minimize the inevitable risk of a shipment going off track? So I have some stories over 10 years, obviously, of shipping, both positive and ones that were challenging that we couldn't necessarily avoid. I remember during COVID, we had a shipment that was flying over Beijing, and the government shut down any arrivals into Beijing because of a big outbreak of COVID, and there was people on planes coming in that were testing COVID positive. So the plane had to circle, and then get rediverted to middle of nowhere China. And then we had to try to work with the airlines in different time zones, and they're not necessarily knowing what's going on or what their next move is to proceed with the plane, and then trying to plan for arrival into PEK. Now all of a sudden the plane's getting diverted to PVG. It's not how it works. All your documents say PEK, all your import stuff says PEK. Your import permit may only actually allow you to fly into PEK.
Right.
Quarantine space is set up in PEK. All of those things that now have to be, mitigated on the fly, and finding the right contacts, in customs in China or in an agent or in an airline cargo. That stuff is really, really tricky, and you have to do everything very, very quickly. So you got to move confidently and with the right contacts, for sure.
Right. Yeah. That was a very challenging time for animal transportation right at the beginning of the pandemic and everything going on. That was extremely challenging. But you're right. Having those contacts in those different agencies and, governmental agencies and everything is going to be your big help and big help everything that you're doing. So, and as you said, ATA being involved with different, stakeholders, governmental, everything, it's a big benefit for animal transportation.
Absolutely. I've noticed specifically that is probably the biggest advantage of doing this for many years is knowing the right contacts. If you just try to, reach out to a sales at airline ABC or, reach out to a booking team, you're only going to get limited answers or limited follow-ups. You really need to find the right mid to high level contacts that can really jump in and get some action quickly. And you need to develop those relationships. You need to build that over time and have trusted partners. So that's a real important.
Yeah. Well, I think you shared upon it, but is there any other, say, important lessons you think folks should hear about making sure there's a successful animal transportation?
I think, first of all, you need to be quality driven, and that means collecting as much data as you can, especially if you want to be a big commercial business at scale. Collect as much data as you can, analyze data. Once you have the data, good business processes and strategies and decisions are generally right there for you to analyze and find a path forward for. So I know that's been very successful for our team. We track every single piece of data that comes in and out of our company to find trends, to find training opportunities, to maintain our success rates for all our big customer base. And then to follow, trend lines for airlines or trend lines for a particular vehicle type or a region or, weather situation. So being quality driven will help you develop processes. You do need to be very process driven with SOPs that can then lead to good training. And again, you keep that continual improvement loop going. I think over time, you really develop a robust regime of quality service, analyzing situations for successful outcomes. I think that's the best way. And then on individual shipments on a day-to-day, you just can't take any variable for granted. You really need to keep a lot of eyes on your shipments and then have the technology available, especially if you want to scale up, to monitor as many variables as you can in real time, both actively and potentially using AI or bots in the background. I know our team does that. We have bots that ping our temperature sensors every 5 seconds to get readings on every vehicle in the world. And then if anything's out of range, we're getting text messages, phone calls, emails, and we're able to actively manage even, a temperature variation of, 5 or 10 degrees in the cargo area. But that's how meticulous I think you need to be to always have successful shipments. But you're also dealing with airlines, you're dealing with third parties, you're dealing with customs, and you're dealing with other vendors that aren't in your control. So you need to almost understand what their job is at all times and be able to help them facilitate you having a successful outcome. Because if I'm managing a shipment, but there's a third-party customs broker in there that I have to use because they're contracted with the consignee, and they're not as experienced, I do need to get more involved to help them, fulfill their portion of the job that they may not have the experience on. So really taking every detail and not taking them for granted.
That's perfect.
That's great.
Well, we're almost set here, but still a few more. I want to just see if you're last thought on this one here. How can we, as far as opportunities and collaborating within the animal transportation industry, all the different stakeholders, as I always said, I'm really happy what you said as far as your last tip. We all do need to be working together in reference to making sure that the animal transport gets to the location safely within the airlines. With the shipper, with you, we all need to be working together to ensure animals get to their destination safely. And one thing, like I said, I always think to myself is that the shipper, there's a lot of assumptions for I'll just say pet shippers. They assume that everything will go smooth, but they have to realize there's a responsibility on their side too, plus the airline, and everybody works together so the animals get to their destinations safely.
I think that's a great point. To have successful outcomes, all the stakeholders need to be bought in. There needs to be smart regulations. Can't be overregulated. Can't be underregulated. It has to be smart regulations. That takes a lot of collaboration and feedback from the industry stakeholders. With a proper regulatory regime, that's a good, rules of the road for everybody to follow and operate, train around. But then the individual stakeholders need to understand the pain points that we all have, because it's difficult to help support an airline or a customs broker or a shipper consignee without really understanding, what their requirements are and their pain points, both on shipping and packing and, managing a shipment. So really being empathetic to what each side is going through, and then help them be successful by really maintaining your accuracy, your consistency, offering support when you can, going that extra mile. So we're not just creating the potential for bad outcomes for other vendors once it's out of our possession. But
Right.
I handed it off, my job's done. No, that's
Right.
not. In live animals, and that's not how it goes.
Right.
The shipment, you can say, is done when it's delivered successfully with a good outcome. In the meantime, even if maybe your contractual piece might have been severed and another party's taken over, we all have responsibilities for successful outcomes, because poor outcomes reflect negatively on the entire supply chain. And
Right.
someone's not going to necessarily put it all on Delta or BioTrans or a regulatory regime. It's just going to come off as a poor outcome and have bad publicity for all involved. So it's really incumbent, and that's why I do really appreciate working with you, Dr. Bryant, and some of the other people in the ATA world that really take that collaboration seriously and are always available and always willing to help share knowledge or try to understand a situation to find a successful outcome. So that partnership is really, really important. And I encourage other people in the industry to take a more active role when it comes to associations, not just the ATA, so you can really develop those relationships and help be good stewards of the industry.
Yeah, love it. Well, thank you. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we are almost.
Before we go, and since we just was on that, Sean, did you want to talk about the ATA conference that you just wrapped up in Doha and your 2026 conference plans?
I do. Thank you, Greta, for that intro. So we just finished up our 2025 51st annual conference in Doha. It was a great experience. We had great turnout. We had a really diverse group of industry professionals, and Qatar Airways did a great job sponsoring. We had some fun events, driving in the dunes, which is a popular Middle East activity. We went to go see the Qatar Airways new Animal Lounge. So that was really nice to see the money they invested and to see some shipments coming in and out. So that's always good to see the CapEx from airlines and regulatory bodies around facilities, because the facilities can be variable from country to country, and that's generally a big risk point, not having good stable transit facilities. So that was good to see. And we have, again, new members from different lines of species and truck builders and customs people. So it was really, really good to see, and it was very successful. We had really good feedback. Next year we're in Halifax, Nova Scotia. So that's going to be really good location for us. And that's going to be on the website, ATA website. We have all the details. We'll be posting updates and signups as the months go on, but we're really looking forward to another successful location and another successful conference. So the conferences, since I've been involved, have gotten better and better and better over the last few years. So there's a lot of value there, and our team does presentations and tries to share our industry knowledge with as many of the participants as we can, and then also gain knowledge from other experts in the field. Since our company does a wide variety, we may do a small portion of avian products, but there are other companies that do 100% avian products. So there's always information you can learn, whether it's truck outfitting or HVAC systems or filtered HEPA systems. So just being inquisitive and really wanting to try to level up your service, it's a good environment to go to these conferences.
Definitely.
That's fantastic.
Well, we are all finished for today. Thank you so much for returning with us, Sean. I'm glad we made it to completion this time. So that's great news there. But thank you for the valuable information that you've shared today. It's been outstanding.
Excellent. Great to be with you both. Look forward to offering up some time anytime you guys feel like you might want to have me back. Thank you, Greta. Thank you, Dr. Bryant. Appreciate all that you do to help inform the industry.
Thank you. Look, Greta, do you have any parting words before we go?
No, I'm just glad I made it on the call and got to meet Sean. So much that I learned, and it, like, as you were saying things, it was like, aha. I had so many aha moments because I would see things happen but didn't know that it might have been BioTrans behind the scenes making things happen. So it's great to meet you and learn so much about your great company.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for following us and listening in today. Join us. I believe we'll have something next week, or the next couple weeks. We'll have something scheduled, and we'll continue on with our Facebook Lives. So thank you for joining us today. Bye.
Thank you.